The Aggies land blue chip safety Jordan Pride, and four-star linebacker Aaron Childs is closer to his decision what their commitments mean for their respective schools. SEC mid-season grades are here, and our director of scouting is handing out report cards. And our Staying Power series, can Florida State keep its spot in the top 10? All this and more on the College Football Recruiting Show starting right now. What's up, everybody? Welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show. I'm Grace Remington with Blair Angulo. And before we begin, you already know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and send your questions into the chat because we'll be answering those at the end of the show. But Blair, let's get to the headlines of the day. Texas A&M adding the number 6 safety in the cycle to its 2024 class. Four-star safety Jordan Pride chose the Aggies over several blue blood programs, including Florida, FSU, Alabama, and Tennessee. Blair, what are the Aggies getting in this commitment?
An instinctual safety prospect, Grace. Jordan Pride does really well to hold his ground. He stays patient in his stance, and he shows really good closing speed, whether that's in pass coverage or in run support. Also a solid basketball player, which the scouts love. So score this as a really good addition for A&M.
2024 four-star linebacker Aaron Childs has narrowed down his long list of suitors to a final 3. He will choose between Michigan, Maryland, and Florida. The Wolverines, currently the crystal ball favorite. Blair, how are you leaning in his recruitment?
I think I'm leaning Michigan as well. They've been the school that's most often mentioned with Aaron Childs, and the buzz sits with the Wolverines heading into the summer. He has scheduled his official visit to Ann Arbor for the June 23rd weekend, so Jim Harbaugh could very well be in pole position with a chance to make a final impression.
And we'll have more on Childs coming up with Steve Wiltfong in just a minute. Over on the transfer front, Ohio State landed defensive tackle Tywone Malone. Malone entered the portal in April after a couple seasons at Ole Miss. Originally a four-star prospect in the 2021 class, Malone also considered Miami during his portal recruitment. Blair, how does this transfer pickup impact the Buckeyes?
This could be huge for Ohio State because it gives them a player capable of seeing the field right away. The Buckeyes had an up and down 2023 recruiting cycle, defending or recruiting the defensive line, missing out on guys like Keon Keeley in the process, but they did get Jason Moore and Will Smith, so adding Malone adds depth and gives that younger core some time to develop.
And 2024 four-star offensive lineman Paki Finau committed to Washington on Monday, the Huskies' third commit this cycle. He chose the Huskies over Penn State, Arizona, Arizona State, and Auburn. Blair, how important is it to keep Finau on the West Coast?
It's huge, and the Huskies and their fans hope that this is the start of a really good summer for UW. Only 3 commitments right now, Grace, sitting outside the top 50 nationally. A bit surprising for a program that is getting some love as a potential Pac-12 title dark horse. Paki Finau is a terrific interior lineman and a really good foundation for what Kalen DeBoer and Coach Scott Huff are trying to build up front.
All right, it's now time for Wiltfong Whiparound. Our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, joining us with recruiting scoops from all over the country. Steve, we'll start with 5-star edge Colin Simmons out of Duncanville, Texas. He's the number 20 overall player in the nation with over 40 offers, and some of the biggest names fighting for him are LSU, Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, and Texas. What's the latest in his recruitment?
Yeah, and the line gets longer and longer, Grace. It goes around the corner. The school is in pursuit of Colin Simmons, one of the most explosive edge rushers in the country. Heading into summer, I still like where LSU stands. He got a chance to get back to Baton Rouge for the Tigers spring game, and talking to him in the past, talking to his family, I think they feel very at home with LSU. They love the coaching staff. They're very familiar with that campus and that program. Their last visit, there was a lot of star power on LSU's campus for that spring game, from Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. Angel Reese is a rock star. They got to hang out with her and spend some time with some of the faces of the LSU community. And I think with each visit to LSU, it makes them feel very comfortable. And again, the word that I get from the Simmons camp about LSU is it feels like home. But look, this is a recruitment that's going to go into the summer. He's going to continue to take other visits some schools that I think are marked for official visits this summer. You have Texas, you have Oregon, you have Miami. He was able to visit Miami this spring, had a good time in Coral Gables, going to get back there with his mother. Oregon was a place he wanted to visit in the spring. It wasn't able to work out, but Oregon's been pushing for Colin Simmons. And of course, Texas, they've been a mainstay in this recruitment. He likes the direction of the program. Alabama, Texas A&M, Tennessee, some of the other contenders for Colin Simmons, but love LSU's position as Brian Kelly and the Tigers push for a top 5 class this cycle. Nobody higher on their board than Mr. Simmons.
All right, we'll stay in the state of Texas. 4-star cornerback Selman Bridges recently received an invite to the Poly Bowl, the top 50 prospect considering several schools, but it sounds like, Steve, there's 3 specifically that have caught his eye. What's next for him?
Yeah, I feel like Arkansas and Texas are certainly in the mix there. He's going to take official visits to both campuses in June. Steve Sarkisian seems to be recruiting him as much as any prospect on the board. That's one of the coaches he talks to the most. Texts with Coach Sarkisian often. Just the little things, regular conversation. But like Colin Simmons, Selman Bridges likes the direction in Texas's program, sees it as a place on the rise, and certainly being able to represent his state. And then with Arkansas, it starts with Coach Marcus Woodson, who's one of the top recruiters in the country, co-defensive coordinator. They've hit it off there. Loves Sam Pittman and loves the vibe in Fayetteville. But I tell you what, the school that I'm watching closely for Selman Bridges right now is USC. I think he loves Coach Sarkisian. I think he loves Coach Dante Williams. Took a visit there in the spring, really enjoyed it. I see him coming back for a game in the fall, and then I see him returning after that for an official visit in November or December. He's going to decide late. It's setting up for USC to get multiple visits from him leading up to that decision. So I think that the Trojans are in an interesting position for him as they battle Texas and Arkansas, among others.
All right, before we continue, y'all know what to do. Throw us a like on this video. Look, Steve's doing the happy dance, the like dance, whatever you want to call it. So how can you not now? All right, so like the video so we can keep bringing you content like this. All right, the top player in Maryland, Steve, has released his 3 finalists. Top 10 linebacker Aaron Sheila is deciding between Michigan, Maryland, and Florida, and you recently spoke to him about his list. What's next in his process?
Yeah, spoke to him, spoke to his dad, spoke to his coach. This is one of the special players in this class, not just for his skill set at 6'3", 230 pounds. He can rush the passer, crash the run, play in space. This is one of my favorite players in the second level in this 2024 class, but he's a great leader, a high football IQ, terrific student. He's down to Maryland, Michigan, and Florida. He's going to take an official visit to Florida in June, then take one to Michigan. He's trying to get one to Maryland on the books here. And I continue to like the Wolverines in this recruitment. Been to campus a couple times. They love everything from the strength and conditioning staff to the nutrition program, to the success on the field, the player development, the academics, Jim Harbaugh. I think Michigan has set the tone in this recruitment as they aim to add to what is the nation's #1 recruiting class. This is a guy that they identified early as one of their favorite players in America. And I think it's up to Maryland and Florida with these upcoming official visits to make a move on the maize and blue for Aaron Child.
All right, Ryan Wingo is a name that comes up quite often on this show. The 5-star wide receiver has been taking his visits with Miami, the latest to make an impression on him. Where does the U stand with the #2 receiver in the country?
Well, one of the reasons why Ryan Wingo is mentioned so much on this show is because he's about as well-traveled as anybody in this class. He's taken over 35 college visits in his process. He's been a blue chipper since his freshman year. He was able to return to Miami this past weekend. Let me remind you, he's taken over 35 college visits, spent 2 days in Miami. They've never spent more time with the head coach over 48 hours as they did on this most recent visit to Miami. Mario Cristobal was basically the tour guide, hung out, spent a lot of time with the Wingo camp. And so while the 24/7 Sports Cristobal is on Georgia, while he's got upcoming official visits to Georgia the first weekend of June, Michigan the second weekend of June, Texas the third weekend of June, and Missouri the fourth weekend of June, I think Miami is a program that is stock up in this recruitment. I expect them to come back for an official visit. They love the staff, talking to him and his dad. They just thought how invested the staff was. His dad said, hey, I'm learning. Go where you're wanted. There might not be a program that's showing they want Ryan Wingo more right now than Miami. So Miami is a program that I'll be watching more closely with Ryan Wingo moving forward as they try and battle some of these other elite programs. And then a reminder, recruits can take more than 5 official visits. We saw Nigel Smith, the top 247 defensive lineman from Texas, schedule 6 official visits. I think he's the first one I've seen to schedule more than 5 official visits. I could see Ryan Wingo taking more than 5, but Miami trending up for the blue chip receiver from St. Louis.
All right, that'll be a fun one to watch. Staying at wide receiver now, 5-star Jeremiah Smith has scheduled an official visit to Georgia. The nation's top wideout is a Buckeye commit. He also has OVs scheduled to Ohio State and Florida. So, Steve, where do the Bulldogs sit among the schools trying to poach him from Columbus?
Yeah, and we talked about Jeremiah Smith on Monday, Grace, because he scheduled that official visit to Florida. It's going to be the first weekend of June, and then he's getting back to Ohio State the second weekend of June. He is going to be at Georgia next weekend for Kirby Smart's scavenger hunt. He's going to be on an official visit. It's going to be a massive recruiting weekend for the Bulldogs as they make a run at 24/7 Sports' #1 ranked recruiting class of all time. Jeremiah Smith, one of the headliners coming in for the scavenger hunt. Now, it's tough to flip a receiver from Ohio State because of the relationship that Brian Hartline pours into with the recruits. The family, Jeremiah Smith, his parents, they love Coach Hartline. They trust him. The player development is obviously there. Ohio State's always pacing to have the first receiver drafted. The offense is off the charts under Ryan Day, who's also involved in this recruitment. But if I had to mark a school that was the biggest threat to flip Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, it would not be Florida. It would be Georgia. I think with what Georgia's done on the field, 2 straight national championships, some of the reports that he has with Georgia commits and their top targets, Dylan Raiola. If Dylan Raiola ends up at Georgia like we have him predicted, I think the Bulldogs are the big leader for the #1 prospect in the country. I think this puts Georgia as the biggest threat to flip Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. Now, that is not a prediction that it's going to happen, but Georgia is the school I'm watching in the Jeremiah Smith sweepstakes after Ohio State. That's going to be a great weekend in Athens. They're going to be trying to find Kirby Smart on campus. The recruits are going to get a lot of time to connect through that scavenger hunt. And I think that Georgia is a team to watch in this recruitment moving forward.
All right, USC also pushing for a few receivers left on the board. Lincoln Riley recently received a commitment from 4-star Xavier Jordan and is in the running for 5-star Mike Matthews and 4-stars TJ Moore and Draylon Miller. Now, Steve, considering who they already have and who they're pursuing, what's the ceiling for this Trojans wide receiver haul?
Well, first, for USC to take Xavier Jordan early with the caliber of receiver that USC can recruit year in and year out, not just from the high school ranks, but from the transfer portal ranks, it goes to show you how talented this young man is. 6'1", 165 pounds, a guy that had a massive junior season. He can run, stretch the field. And I got a chance to see him at the overtime OT7 event in Austin earlier this spring. His ball skills are off the charts. He can make big plays in traffic. He's an after-the-catch guy that can be dynamic. So a really nice early pickup for USC as they try and land a second straight top 10 class after signing one in 2023. And they're in on some big-time receivers moving forward. You have Mike Matthews, the 5-star from Georgia. He's going to take an official visit to USC in June. Loved his visit out to USC when he went there earlier in his process. Now they're battling Tennessee and Clemson. Alabama's in there. They're recruiting Mike Matthews as a 2-way guy. And then Georgia rounds out the top 5. But USC is in an interesting spot for Mike Matthews. Then you have Ryan Pelham from in-state, top 100 player in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings. Like Jordan, he is a big play guy, 52 receptions for over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns as a junior. I think they're battling Oregon for Ryan Pelham, but they're obviously well positioned for him. And then Draylon Miller out of the Lone Star State, one of the best pure football players in Texas in the 2024 class. One of the reasons why I have not predicted Draylon Miller to LSU yet, even though I think LSU is in fantastic position for him, is because of USC. When you talk to people with knowledge of Draylon Miller's recruitment around Draylon Miller, they say do not sleep on USC. He visited there in April. He's going to return for an official visit in June. This is a young man that had 21 receiving touchdowns, Grace, 3 more rushing scores at almost 10 yards per carry, returned a kick for a score, had 2 interceptions. Then he is a dominant basketball player. He's just a ferocious athlete that USC covets. And I think that they have a great chance to beat USC for him. And then one more name I want to mention is Walter Matthews, a tight end from SEC country. He's already been to USC several times. He's going to take an official visit in early June. So USC in the thick of it for some of the best, most dynamic receivers and tight ends in the country. And Xavier was the guy that just gets them started.
Yeah, and with Lincoln Riley's history and the quarterbacks they have on that roster, how could you be a receiver and turn that down? Speaking of, we can't do a segment without talking about the quarterbacks. We're going to look at a few from the 2025 and 26 classes. The top QB in the class of 25 is Bryce Underwood. He recently took a visit to Ohio State, the Buckeyes battling Penn State, LSU, Michigan, and Texas, among others, for his signature. Steve, where does Underwood's recruitment stand coming out of that trip to Columbus?
Well, Bryce Underwood has always been high on Ohio State with what they've been able to do with the development of C.J. Stroud. But another thing that really caught Underwood and his family's eye was Justin Fields coming back to Columbus and graduating from Ohio State after, obviously being a great football player there, first-round draft pick, showing that there was a path for Justin Fields to still get his degree and take care of him off the field was something that was very exciting. But certainly they love Ryan Day, what he's done with quarterbacks, the first-round draft picks, the offense. They see the player development. Proximity to home is solid there. Ohio State is a major, major player for Bryce Underwood moving forward. So is LSU. He's going to return to Baton Rouge in June for another multi-day visit after a terrific visit earlier this calendar year where they spent 3 days on campus at LSU, even attended classes like a regular student. Joe Sloan, LSU's quarterbacks coach, is recruiting him as hard as anybody, and they just love the vibe at LSU. I still love LSU's position. He's going to visit Texas the first weekend of June, and he'll pop up at Michigan anytime like he did several times this spring. And Kurt Campbell, Michigan's new quarterbacks coach, really hit it off with that family. So don't sleep on Michigan moving forward for Bryce Underwood. There could be other contenders, but those are the schools I think most prominent right now.
And in the 2026 class, Jared Curtis is the name we all need to get to know. The Nashville quarterback has already been offered by college football giants like Alabama, FSU, Miami, and Notre Dame. Steve, you just wrote a great story about him. Why is he such a highly sought-after prospect this early in his career?
Yeah, this is the second 2026 quarterback we've talked about on this show and on Whiparound because he's elite. Right next to Julian Juju Lewis out of Georgia. This is a guy that's as coveted as anybody in the country at the position, regardless of graduation year, out of Nashville Christian High, All-State Mr. Football finalist, that throws the ball as well as any quarterback in America right now. He's already been to Alabama several times, going to go back in June. He's also going to visit Texas in June. He's been to Georgia, going to return to Georgia. Georgia loves him. Michigan just offered, Auburn just offered, Notre Dame just offered. He's going to get up to South Bend soon, amongst other places. LSU's in there. This is a guy. We had Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields in the same class. So that had a lot of buzz on who was number one. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of debate for the next several years on who's number one in 2026 between Julian Juju Lewis and Jared Curtis.
All right, one more time, Steve, before I let you go, can we get a little like dance? There you go. If you liked all of the scoops from Steve, really, it doesn't get better anywhere else. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel. Yep. All right, thanks for your time, Steve.
Hit that like button. Thank y'all. See you next week.
And for the best recruiting intel, purchase an annual VIP membership with 24/7 Sports. You'll get the news before anybody else does and a subscription to Paramount Plus. Hold up your phone right now. Use the QR code on the screen. It'll take you straight to our website where you can sign up.
I'm excited to announce that I'll be committing to University of Tennessee. With that being said, I just want to announce that I will be committing to Auburn University.
Go Dogs.
Always love the hat fake out. Some pretty cool moments there as some of the best talent in the nation announcing their decisions to SEC schools. And here's a look at the SEC's top 10 classes in the recruiting rankings. Georgia on top with what could be the highest rated class of all time. That's in all of college football. LSU, South Carolina, and Tennessee all have double-digit commitments right now, and Alabama right there at number 7. Although it's important to note the average recruit ranking for that class is 95. That's the highest in the SEC. Well, now that we've reached mid-spring, let's put some grades on these recruiting classes. And Andrew Ivins joining us now. He's our director of scouting, but today he's also the principal because he's handing out some report cards for these classes. So Andrew, let's start with LSU, who sits 5th in the team recruiting rankings. They have 14 commits, tight end Trey'Dez Green and quarterback Colin Hurley among the headliners. And we're going to do this from A+ through F. What grade are you giving Brian Kelly's 2024 class?
I'm giving the Tigers an A+. And Brian Kelly, let's go back to this time last year, when he had the fake accent, was trying to act all Southern. We saw in that initial 2023 class, that first cycle for them, they recruited nationwide. It felt like he was at Notre Dame. Fast forward to this 2024 class, he's already got 7 prospects from the state of Louisiana committed. LSU leads on the crystal ball for 3 more guys right in their backyard. So it seems like LSU has figured things out. You mentioned Trey'Dez Green, the big tight end. They got another one committed in Tavion Galloway. Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator there, they love to use the tight ends, get them involved. That's kind of the X factor for the Tigers on offense. And I think that's as good of a duo as you're going to find so far in the 2024 cycle. Deshaun McBride is another prospect they have committed, in-state safety prospect. He just ripped off a 4.53 on the lasers at a camp over the weekend. I think he's someone that could play multiple spots in the secondary. So really like the group LSU has assembled. I think this is exactly what the Tigers need to do, and we'll see how they finish it out. Also making a ton of headway with Kai Bates, a defensive back in Orlando. He's one of my favorite corner prospects out here. So far, A+ for LSU, and they're going to have a ton of official visitors this summer.
Moving on to South Carolina, Andrew, or should I say Professor Ivins. Shane Beamer is really up there recruiting. They are 3rd in the SEC, 9th overall nationally, 10 commitments, a lot of buzz, a lot of momentum. And this class has been a really strong point early on heading into the summer. What do you make of this 2024 class for them? What grade would you hand out to the Gamecocks?
I gave the Gamecocks an A, right? They are absolutely passing right now. And I think it starts with the offensive line. If you guys have followed the football recruiting show, you listen to my podcast with Cooper Patagna, we keep bringing up how the 2024 cycle lacks those blue chip offensive tackles. It seems like it's a down year, and South Carolina, they need help on offense in that offensive line room right now, and they need it long term. And the Gamecocks have 2 really good guys committed, Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson. I like those guys a lot. And then they got 2 projects in Blake Franks and Mike Williams. So they are loading up at a key position where there really isn't a ton of elite talent out there. I like that. The tight end they got committed, Mike Smith out of Savannah, down in Georgia. He's one of the best pass catchers we have seen out there. We know that South Carolina got Nicholas Harbor on signing day last cycle. We think it's going to take some time for him to get ready. So Mike Smith, he's someone that has a chance to potentially step in and play right away. Then you peek to the June visitors list for South Carolina. It includes Dylan Stewart, the 5-star pass rusher. Again, Shane Beamer, he went into the DMV last cycle and shocked many, landing Nicholas Harbor. So we'll see what they can do. Really, really good group. And again, I think it starts up front with those corner protectors. South Carolina, that offensive line arrow is pointing up when we think about long term.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch the momentum Shane Beamer has in seemingly every aspect of his program right now. We'll go to Mississippi State now, where Zach Arnett still trying to get things going on the recruiting trail in his first season. The Bulldogs rank 11th in the SEC, only 5 commits, but one of those is top 20 quarterback Josh Flowers. How do you grade this class?
Yeah, I gave Mississippi State a C+, and you mentioned Josh Flowers, the quarterback. He's an electric dual threat talent, a guy that can move the chains certainly with his legs. And Zach Arnett, I still think him and his staff are trying to find their footing. Go back to the 2023 cycle, really difficult situation with him taking over for the late Mike Leach, and they closed well on the recruiting trail, finished number 26 in the rankings, but right now they're all the way down in the 60s. You mentioned they got 5 guys committed, but only one prospect from their backyard. One of the top 25 ranked prospects in the state of Mississippi is committed to the Bulldogs. We've seen a ton of in-state prospects commit to other schools. TJ Lockhart's the guy I'm mentioning. He's number 19 in the state of Mississippi. So it'll be interesting to see how really the next few months go for them. And Mississippi State, I mean, we cannot knock them. They are all about the evaluations, getting kids on campus, getting them, putting them through drills at camp. So I think if you're a Mississippi State fan, that's what we're going to be keeping an eye on. Who they get on campus in June, who do they work out, and who ultimately ends up committed. But right now, definitely some work left to do for Mississippi State and first-year head coach Zach Arnett.
Mark Stoops has brought Kentucky to a bowl game every year since 2016. The recruiting success has reflected that on-field success, but not here in this 2024 recruiting cycle. Only 2 commitments. They're last in the SEC. And Andrew, I'm afraid maybe to ask you to pull out the Sharpie, but what grade are you handing out Kentucky?
I gave them a C, right? And I think it's hard to poke holes in Mark Stoops and his staff's philosophy, what they do. I mean, over the past few years, Kentucky's had 13 players selected in the NFL draft. That includes quarterback Will Levis. But, I've been wondering, when are they going to take the step forward? You mentioned all those bowl games. It wasn't too long ago that they had just won 10 games, but they're not getting the blue chippers. Now, when you look at the prospects expected to visit this upcoming summer, there are some big names there, and that's traditionally when Kentucky looks to make a move on the recruiting trail. So I think you got to be patient, but right now, certainly Kentucky, it's lacking on the recruiting front. I would think Mark Stoops, a guy that continuously puts out good squads, gets guys to the NFL. We would see a little bit more, not seeing it right now. And I do think it's a bit of a down year in state there in Kentucky. So that's playing a little bit into this. But we'll see what they do this summer. Some big-time prospects expected to visit. Kendall Jackson, a defensive lineman out of Florida. I like him a lot. They get him in the boat, then they can get this thing turned around.
All right, before we continue, everybody watching, you know what I'm going to ask. Go ahead and like this video. We're trying to get to 100 likes on the stream today, and throw your questions into the chat while you're there, too. We're answering those at the end of the show. Now, Andrew, let's take a look at the rest of your grades here. And, man, I wish you could have graded my papers in school, because this is a friendly report card right here. What do we have? We have 5 A's, only 3 C's, and it looks like the SEC West kind of has the better average here, maybe like a high B. But let's go through the rest of these 10 classes here, starting with the 2 most dominant schools on the recruiting trail. That's Georgia and Alabama. And you have to go back to the year 2000 to find the last time they both finished outside the top 10. You have Georgia at an A+, Bama at an A. What do you like about these classes?
Well, Georgia, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, anytime I talk with someone in Athens, they continue to bring up how this is such a pivotal class for them. They have to get dudes on campus, and UGA right now, it feels like they're just drafting on the defensive side of the ball. They continue to get talent there. So I think it's notable when we look at who they're chasing after, who they have committed on the offensive side of the ball. I really like some of those individuals. Nitron Tuggle, a wide receiver. I think he's electric with the ball in his hands. And then you heard Steve Wiltfong mention it on the Whiparound. I mean, they lead for Dylan Raiola on the 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball. They're also going to get 5-star wide receiver Ryan Wingo on campus, 5-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, Carter Nelson, Jaden Randall, 2 tight ends. So Georgia, it's a fine-tuned machine right now, not surprising. Now with Alabama, you brought it up, that class average. I mean, they only have a few guys committed right now. And I always caution people this time of the year when we talk about the Crimson Tide, they really haven't took that recruiting machine out of the driveway yet and put it into drive. Traditionally, July and August is when they start picking up all their commitments, and I think that will be the case once again. I do like the group they have committed right now. Julian Sayin, one of the top quarterbacks in the 2024 cycle. We know the quarterback position is somewhere where Alabama's trying to find answers, and Sayin's one of the best guys there. That's why I gave Alabama an A right now.
Moving on to Tennessee and Florida, both are looking to build off top 15 classes in the 2023 recruiting cycle. You have Tennessee with a B+, you have Florida with an A so far. How are you feeling about both programs?
Let's start with the Gators, right? I mean, coming off a difficult year one for Billy Napier, I don't think enough has been said on a national level about them getting 5-star safety Xavier Filsam out of the state of Texas. That is about as impressive of a get we have seen so far in the 2024 recruiting cycle. Yes, they're going to need to hang on to him, but they also got some good linebackers committed. And then the quarterback, DJ Lagway. Florida, it looked like the future of that quarterback room was going to be as good as it's ever been. And then there's some defections, some things that they can't really control. The NIL situation with Jaden Rashada. DJ Lagway, probably the closest thing we have seen to Anthony Richardson in this cycle. He's an elite athlete with a big arm, just needs to get more consistent. So I like what Florida's doing right now, recruiting their backyard well, still a ton of big names in play for them. Another program that's going to get a ton of visitors on campus. Tennessee, their MO has really been the past few years is, I think, finding potential impact players on the defensive side of the ball, and they continue to do that. Caleb Beasley, he's a guy that had 9 interceptions as a junior. I haven't found a defensive back with that many takeaways in terms of the blue chippers in the 2024 cycle. So I like what they're doing there. And then quarterback Jake Merklinger, we saw him on the intro to this segment. I think he's the perfect guy for the Volunteers to take after Nico Iamalieva. Merklinger has started more games than anyone else in the 2024 cycle. He doesn't get rattled. He can run the football. And I think he's someone that if something were to happen to Nico, he can step in and carry that offense. So like what Tennessee is doing as well. And they are certainly also chasing after some big fish with a bunch of guys expected to make their way to Knoxville in the coming months.
All right, we'll go to Texas A&M and Arkansas now. We all know the pressure Jimbo Fisher is facing on the field this season. The Aggies currently rank 25th nationally with 6 commits. As for the Hogs, they're in the top 20, which would give them back-to-back top 25 classes. You rated A&M a B+, the Hogs a B. Why did you go there?
I really like what Texas A&M is doing on defense. We'll see what they're going to do on offense, but they pick up a commitment earlier this week from Jordan Pride, a top 247 safety. I think he's got the tools and someone that can play a variety of different positions on the back end. They also got a linebacker that recently committed out of the state of Mississippi, Tristan Jernigan. He's got some traits not talked about enough. And then Dalen Evans, a longtime defensive line commit. Remember 2 years ago what the Aggies were able to do with that defensive front. This is a guy that would rank right there with all those other 5-stars that they took. And Dalen Evans has other schools coming after him. Florida's after him. I think Texas A&M needs to hold on to Dalen Evans. He is a key piece to the class. Reminds me of Gervin Dexter, who was at Florida, just selected in the 2nd round of the NFL draft. When you talk about Arkansas, they already got a few of the state's top-ranked prospects committed. Sam Pittman, we know that he can recruit. They missed out on Aaron Nolan, the quarterback, but they get KJ Jackson, a kid from the state of Alabama. He's also left-handed. That's notable because the new offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, he's worked with some lefties in the past. Have you ever heard of Tua Tagovailoa? Dan Enos coached him up when he was at Alabama. So I like what Arkansas is doing. They're always going to be, as long as Sam Pittman's there, focused on finding big individuals and dominating the trenches. So far in this 2024 class, I think they're doing just that with the group they got committed.
You're giving both Auburn and Ole Miss Bs as we hit mid-May. Obviously, Hugh Freeze new there, and he's been hitting the transfer portal. His old school Ole Miss has 6 commitments so far in the cycle. What makes you give them both Bs right now?
They're probably a little generous with this B for Auburn. And, Hugh Freeze, I don't want to take any knock on him. I think it's been really impressive what he has done since he has arrived on the Plains. Late in that 2023 cycle, they flipped a ton of kids, got them committed, and then they've made a big splash here in the transfer portal in that second window, getting Peyton Thorne, the quarterback from Michigan State. 2024 recruiting, we haven't really seen it yet. Walker White, we saw him on the intro. He picked Auburn, but just a handful of guys committed. I think they're going to hit their stride here as we get to the summer months and then into the season. They're involved with Cam Coleman, a big-time wide receiver prospect. I mean, if he went to Auburn, that's a guy that could potentially play day one. So like what Auburn is doing there. And remember, they just opened a new football facility. I'm a big believer that, the Auburn fans are always going to support that program. So they just need to win some games, and the fan base will be there. And I think that's going to help Hugh Freeze here as this cycle progresses. Ole Miss, is transferred to the SIP. When you look at their class, I like Jeffrey Rush, the interior defensive lineman they have committed. But, I still think the folks in Oxford are kind of juggling, hey, how much do we want to be involved in the transfer portal? How much do we want to be involved in the high school recruiting process? Last cycle, they landed 5-star Suntarine Perkins and top 247 wide receiver Aiden Williams. Those were really big gets for them. But, not a ton of guys in the boat so far. I will say DeMond Williams, the quarterback they have committed out of Arizona, I think he could be exciting in Lane Kiffin's offense. He's a dual threat talent. Now, I don't know when he's going to get on the field. It seems like Ole Miss is always taking transfer quarterbacks, but he's kind of electric and someone that I think can move the chains with both his arm and legs. So we'll see what Ole Miss does here. And they, too, will probably have a bunch of visitors on campus here in the month of June.
All right, before we get to our last two teams, keep the likes coming, people. You're already here, so why not click the thumbs up button? We're trying to get to 100 likes by the end of this show. Our last two teams, Andrew, Vanderbilt and Missouri. You have a B for Vandy, 12th in the SEC with 5 commits. It does feel like they're a program on the come up, though. And a C for Mizzou as it sits 13th in the SEC with 3 pledges. How do you feel about these two classes?
Well, Vandy, Josh Pate said it on his show, right? He's taking the over in terms of their win total for 2023. I look at Vandy's class, and I know our former colleague Barton Simmons is there, but man, they every take they have, I think, makes a ton of sense. And the reason Vandy's got a B is because they needed to find a quarterback. They didn't take one last cycle, and they got 2 guys committed. Whit Muschamp, who's the son of UGA defensive coordinator Will Muschamp, and then this kid, Jeremy St. Hilaire. Both those guys are in-state prospects. So you put on the tape, and there's a lot to like about them. So Vandy addressing a position of need, and they also lead on the crystal ball for Cameron Keys, who's a cornerback out of the state of Florida that might move into the top 247 for us. So I think Vandy, they're doing just what they need to do. Now, on the flip side, Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz, another program that's kind of lived in the transfer portal. Let's not forget, it wasn't too long ago that they signed 5-star wide receiver Luther Burden. That's what Missouri was able to do, but it seems like the recruiting has dropped off here a little bit. It's been a bit difficult for them to kind of connect with some of the local prospects. They do have a quarterback committed, but you would think you would have seen a little bit more for the Tigers, but at the same time, they continue to invest just so much time in that transfer portal, and they've had success. Last season, Missouri had one of the top defenses in the SEC, and a good chunk of those guys came via the transfer portal. So we'll see how much more, they look to the high school ranks, but it's a program that's really saving some of those counters and spaces for veterans and mercenaries that can come in and play right away.
All right, so the SEC looking pretty good overall, thanks to Professor Ivins. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. And for more from him.
I don't want a bunch of calls from parents, right? I'm not trying to sit in any parent-teacher meeting.
You might get them. I don't know. You talk these recruits up pretty well, though. All right, thanks, Andrew. For more from Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagna, make sure you listen to the Football Recruiting Podcast. They record every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, breaking down the biggest storylines on the recruiting trail. You can download and listen wherever you get your pods. Last week, we began our Staying Power series. How well can these teams close out the cycle? Today, we're looking at FSU and the top prospects you see on your screen here. The Noles are currently 8th in the team recruiting rankings, but they haven't finished with a top 10 class since 2017. Does Florida State have what it takes to break that streak in 2024? Zach Blostein of Noles 24/7 is here to answer that question. Zach, thanks for joining us. We'll start with here. FSU has 11 commitments in the 2024 class. That's headlined by 5-star tight end Landon Thomas, who they flipped from Georgia. Now, Mike Norvell's staff has been beating the nation's top programs for some of these recruits. What do you make of the recruiting success they're having so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive, but I think, the main culprit of it is that Mike Norvell and his staff have had a lot of time to cultivate relationships. They've been at this, now this is year 4 for Norvell and his staff, and, they've been able to visit these high school prospects for multiple years now. I mean, you mentioned Landon Thomas. He's a guy that they had committed all the way back in his freshman year. That was in 2021. He obviously had decommitted and then committed to Georgia and then actually flipped back this spring. But he's a guy that they've had a relationship with for, dating back to all the way back to 2021. So, I don't know, if they would have been able to pull that off if not for that long-standing relationship. And I think that's what Mike Norvell really stresses to these prospects is building those true, genuine relationships. And I think that's starting to pay off for him and his staff.
Zach, Florida State is looked as transfer U, and they've brought in 23 transfers over the last 2 cycles. A lot of those prospects have made immediate impacts, and that, of course, limits the amount of high schoolers that you can take into every cycle. But what do you make of their method, and do you feel like maybe they could be changing back towards taking more high schoolers on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I think in a normal scenario, they'd like to be recruiting the high school ranks more often than taking a bunch of transfers in. But I think the transfer portal pretty much saved them, right? It allowed them to kind of garner an amount of talent that I don't think they would have been able to just solely recruiting the high school ranks. And it made it possible for them to, rebuild their roster. They had 2 not so great seasons in Mike Norvell's first 2 years on campus. And then obviously this past year they go 10-3. And I think the primary reason for that's why they're called Transfer Portal U. Mike Norvell is the king of the transfer portal. And he's just done such a great job at recruiting guys through the portal. But, they want to put a more of an emphasis on high school recruiting. I think you're seeing that more in this 2024 recruiting class. And I would expect that to continue to trend that way in the years to come.
Now, FSU's 11 commits, a little bit on the lower side, but part of what goes into being able to stay in the top 10 is having highly rated targets still on the board who are interested in your program. Who are some of the names fans should keep an eye on that Florida State is actively pursuing?
Yeah, I think that the number one guy to know is Charles Lester. He's a 5-star defensive back out of Riverview in Sarasota, Florida. FSU's been involved with him from the start. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Colorado are the other top competition for Lester. But he could decide at any time. And right now, I think FSU leads for him. He's gone on record saying that multiple times to us and other reporters in recent months. And, I think he could probably take his recruitment the distance. But if signing day were today, I would expect him to end up in FSU's class. And then JoJo Trader, he's probably Florida State's top remaining wide receiver target on the board. They already have 4 receivers committed in their 2024 class, but landing Trader would pretty much be icing on the cake. He's a guy that's electric, can catch jump balls, pretty much do everything. You guys see his stats right there, but yeah, really impressive prospect. They're gonna have to beat out Miami, which is the hometown school for him, down there at Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida. But yeah, he's a guy that FSU absolutely wants to land, and they'll probably get him on campus for an official visit this summer. The last guy I'll note, Kylan Fox. Yeah, Kylan Fox, 4-star tight end out of Grayson in Georgia. He's visiting Florida State this weekend, actually, and I expect him to make a decision sometime within the next month. I like where Florida State sits right now, and he'd be a nice compliment to a guy you guys mentioned earlier, 5-star Landon Thomas. And the two are actually really close friends. They'll both be on campus this weekend as Thomas looks to add Fox to this class.
A lot of good names there, obviously, for Florida State, and they're pacing for maybe their best class in the last decade. But if they didn't get there, Zach, if they didn't finish inside the top 10 nationally, what would be some potential roadblocks for Coach Norvell and company?
Yeah, I think you got to look at the other 2 in-state schools, right? I think both of those coaching staffs are prioritizing high school recruiting more than pretty much anybody. And Billy Napier's formed a staff that has a lot of manpower, and they're going and getting after it. They've done an excellent job recruiting the high school ranks. And as we all know, Mario Cristobal, if he's known for one thing, it's his recruiting success. And he's a guy that obviously had Miami with a top 10 or so class last year. And, I think they could be pretty tough obstacles for Florida State, as they're all 3 of those schools are involved on a lot of the similar recruits in the state.
Well, Zach, now that we've looked at the potential prospects left on the board and maybe potential obstacles, why don't you give us the verdict here? Do you think Florida State has the staying power to finish the 2024 cycle in the top 10?
I do. I think they do have the staying power. finally, right? Like it's been a while since Florida State's been in that conversation in the high school ranks. We talked about their success in the portal, but I think 2024 is the year for them. You know, they've got on the field success, you know, in the books, right, with the 2022 season. The 2023 season is looking even better for them with all the guys they added through the portal and the guys they maintained on their roster, like Jordan Travis and Jared Verse. And they're going to use that to sell to high school recruits over the next year or so, leading up to signing day. And, you know, the guys I mentioned earlier, Fox, Lester, and Trader, among, you know, a ton of other guys that they're in on, I think they're going to be well suited for a top 10 class come December or February, whenever we're taking count.
All right, great insight from our guy, Zach. Thanks for joining us. And for more of his reporting, for more FSU football and recruiting news, be sure to check out Noles247.com for all the latest updates. All right, get out your phones, people. It is time to mark your calendar. These are the most important events happening in the recruiting world this weekend. The Elite 11 Regional in Atlanta. Some of the best quarterbacks down south are competing to punch their ticket to the finals this summer. 24/7 Sports' Cooper Patagna will be in the ATL for all the action. Blair, who are you looking forward to seeing participate?
Yeah, there could be a couple big names in attendance. They have not been confirmed, but Jake Merlinger, the Tennessee commit, and Aaron Nolan, the Ohio State commit, two big-time quarterbacks that are vying and trying to punch their tickets to Los Angeles for the big Elite 11 finals this summer. And obviously they would be, I think, top and prime candidates to potentially be able to book those flights.
Then we have the Under Armour Camp Series heading to Baltimore this weekend. Our director of scouting, you just saw him on the show, Andrew Ivins, and national recruiting analyst Brian Doan will be there live for 24/7 Sports watching the local prospects. Blair, how important are these camps in helping recruits get noticed by college football programs?
They're huge, especially camps like this where there are cameras everywhere and every rep is being filmed. A lot of these players are able to then have eyeballs on them in terms of the coaches that go out and check out some of the video that gets shot at these camps. And then also there's testing data, right? Players go out and run the 40s, they do agilities, they do verticals, they do the L drill, they do one-on-ones for a limited portion of these camps. So it's a huge event, and they're going up against the top prospects. Typically this is invite only, so it's best on best, and the cream rises, as they say, Grace.
Yes, it does. And you are doing some traveling too, Blair, starting Monday. You'll be in Arizona for a few of the high school spring showcases. That state of course, is home to 5 stars Dylan Raiola and Elijah Rushing. Can you give us a sneak peek of what you're expecting to see there?
Yeah, I'm hoping to see Dylan Raiola that first day on May 15th. That's coming up on Monday. Big spring showcases in the state of Arizona with people unfamiliar with the state and what they do out there. They invite 4, 5, maybe 6, sometimes even up to 8 schools to one location so that college coaches can go and evaluate at one place, but see as many players as they can during those couple hours. So it's going to be huge. I'll be able to see Dylan Raiola, running back Christian Clark, who has a number of big-time offers like Texas and Georgia and Alabama, and I'm hoping to make a few stops there in the greater Phoenix area here in the next few days.
Phoenix is so much fun. I think I've said this to you before. I'm so jealous of these trips. I know you're working, but it's still a really cool experience. All right.
Phoenix is, especially this time of year, right, when it's not too hot and it's not 118 degrees or whatever it gets up to, but we're just still kind of figuring out whether it's going to be spring or summer. It's a beautiful time to get out there, and the cherry on top is being able to see as many recruits and prospects as possible.
Yeah, it makes your job a whole lot easier when you can see those guys in person, I'm sure. Let's get to some viewer questions, but before we do, everyone, keep on liking this video so we can keep producing this content for you. We're trying to get to 100 likes on the stream today, so we're almost there. Go ahead, click the thumbs up. Our first question coming from Hannah G. She's asking about that change to the rule official visits, and I think Wiltfong mentioned it earlier. He thinks Ryan Wingo will be taking some more. But Blair, do you foresee a lot of recruits taking advantage of being able to go on more than 5 OVs, or do you think only a few will be using more than that?
I think only a few. I think that's going to be, I think, something that only the elite players can do, the 5 stars, right? The ones that have the 8 or 9 schools after their signature. And I do feel like, for the most part, the spring evaluate or the early signing period in December was a huge part of why the recruits were committing early. So I think that's still going to be the case. I think we're still going to be on pace for a lot of prospects coming off the board early, even before the season, early in the season. And by then, I think official visits will be wrapped up. There will be a few guys, right? The Wingos. I could see like the Keon Colemans or the Dylan Stewarts of the world being able to go out and maybe take 7, 8, 9 visits and giving as many schools an opportunity to wow them. But I think that's going to be limited really to those players that maybe are worth the effort for some of these college coaches staffs to, potentially get on their campus.
Hey, the way they roll out the red carpet for these guys, why not? Take them all. Our next question from Roman 388. This is good. We were talking about the potential wide receiver haul USC could have. Do you have any predictions or insights on which 2024 quarterback ends up at USC?
Well, if Dylan Raiola ends up at Georgia, which obviously seems to be the momentum right now and the buzz for the Bulldogs to land the #1 quarterback and the #1 prospect in this class, I do feel like then USC will either pivot to Elijah Brown, who is going to be taking an official visit to campus later this offseason and has Stanford, has UCLA really high on his list. I would think that the modern day product is really high on the Trojans. I think he really likes what they've built there, and what's not to like about Lincoln Riley and all those Heisman trophies that they're winning up there, being able to go in there and maybe compete for the job against Malachi Nelson early on in his career. And I think if that doesn't work out for USC, if Elijah Brown for some reason goes somewhere else, I would not be surprised to see them trying to flip someone, right? Maybe go back in and get a guy that has a really good senior season, a player that maybe starts to look around if the situation that he committed to maybe isn't as great as it looked before he made that decision, right? I think we still have the whole season to play out. There's going to be obviously coaching movement, and the coaching carousel never stops spinning. And so I think USC would then pivot to that, and I would be on red alert if I was another program and USC and Lincoln Riley are coming after my quarterback.
They could certainly pull it off. Our last question related to our staying power segment, Tyler C. asked, do you think Michigan has the staying power to remain #1? I'll just add they have 16 commits right now. Their rating is 245.
I don't think so, and I'm going to get a lot of flack here because I was giving Michigan a lot of love earlier in the week. I think fans were all up in my mentions on Twitter and Instagram with, me, I think, saying that the best fit for 5-star offensive tackle Brandon Baker was Michigan. But right now I'm going to say that the staying power is no, and that's because Georgia right now is pacing for that top class. If they get Dylan Raiola, if they're able to flip a Jeremiah Smith and maybe get some of the top 5 stars that they're in on, which you would assume Georgia would be in a really good spot there, I think Georgia has that opportunity to supplant them and to be the #1 class. So the staying power for Michigan, maybe not so high. I'm not really confident that they'll be able to stay there, but I do think it's a step in the right direction because, Grace, last year we were wondering what was going to happen with Michigan. Why are they not recruiting better? They've reached, back-to-back college football playoffs. Jim Harbaugh seems to be one of the coaches that does such a terrific job when he gets recruits on campus, but now we're seeing some of that pay off, and the dividends are there on paper and on the table. So even though they might not have staying power to be #1, I think you still have to really like what they're building there in Ann Arbor if you're a fan.
Yeah, the fans have been clamoring for it, and now we're starting to see that work pay off. All right. Great job, Blair. Great working with you this week. And that's going to wrap it up for us in this show, everybody. Thanks for watching. On your way out, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We'll be back here Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern. Until then, have a great night.